Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And he went away in a boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all of the towns and arrived ahead of them. As he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored the boat. When they got out of the boat, people at once recognized him and rushed about that whole region and began to bring the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages or cities or farms, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. So I told you a few weeks ago that there's a whole bunch of books that I love just because of the title. I've never actually bought any of them, let alone read any of them, but I just love the titles. And I told you that one of my favorite book titles were, If God Had a Refrigerator, Your Picture Would Be on It. And another one I like, a book about Moses that says, and the title is, Here I Am, Lord, Send Aaron. But there is a much more serious book, and it's a book about Martha and Mary, about how busy we become, so that we lose sight of all that's important, how busy we become, and amazing how much enriching stuff we can miss. And we all know that phrase, don't just sit there, do something. Well, this book was called, Don't Just Do Something, Sit There. And I love that. Don't just do something, sit there. There comes a time in the life of a congregation or a committee or a person of God when the time taken to just sit quietly and pray and think is time well spent. Most especially when the alternative is to run around like a headless chicken. So you also know that I like Facebook memes. And one of them I saw recently was captioned, I don't take time off because the devil doesn't take time off. And at the bottom of the meme it said, you've got the wrong role model. I don't take time off because the devil doesn't take time off. You've got the wrong role model. Jesus has sent the 12 out on a mission. They are to cast out demons, so exercise. The other kind of exercise, not the kind I strenuously avoid doing. The other kind, driving out demons. And proclaiming a message of repentance. And he sent them out and told them, go lightly, just take a staff and one cloak, not two cloaks, and just go out there and do it. And they come back and report to him. And they told them all that they had done and taught. So apparently that message of repentance is teaching. It's not lecturing, it's not haranguing, it's teaching. And Mark, in his usual crisp way, doesn't describe much detail here, but Jesus looks at them, and now the disciples are called apostles. It's the only time Mark uses that word. A disciple is someone who follows a teacher. You know, it's a sort of sidekick. It's It's a group of people who want to listen to the teaching of this teacher. An apostle is something different. An apostle is someone who is sent. It's a messenger. It's someone who goes and represents someone. And they have been sent. They're no longer disciples. They're no longer just sitting and listening, soaking it all in. They've been sent on a mission, so now they are apostles. But he looks at them and he must notice instantly that they are spent. He sent them on quite a mission. And they have faithfully fulfilled that mission, and now they come back, and it looks as if every ounce of energy has been spent as a messenger of Jesus, as one who has been sent and faithfully gone, and now comes back to report. Because no sooner had they told him all that they had done and taught, he said to them without any preamble, he said, "Come away to a deserted place by yourselves and rest a while." Deserted places in the Bible are dripping with meaning. Yes, they are places where one can be by oneself. They are places where you can feel beautifully isolated and batteries can be recharged. But notice a number of times in the Old Testament that the wilderness or a deserted place is some place where you meet God. A place where God communicates, appears sometimes even, in, a burning bush, or a mighty wind, or a still small voice in the silence. But God comes to people in places where there is enough peace and quiet that God can be seen and heard and almost touched. So the deserted place is a place to recharge, but it's also a place to encounter the divine. And off they go. I know that there is a terrible interpretation of the phrase self-care. In modern ears, self-care can sound like slacking. It can sound like caring for the self before we care for another. It can sound like taking too much time off. It can sound like simply wanting to be off the grid for the sake of being off the grid. And then we read Mark's Gospel and discover that self-care is biblical, taught by Jesus himself. It doesn't work out very well, though. The best laid plans of mice and men get off the glade, as Robert Burns once wrote. And so it is for them. Somehow the crowds see Jesus and the disciples getting out of town, figure out where they're going, and by the time they get there, the crowd is there already. And then Jesus sees the crowd. Now, time out. In Mark's Gospel, there is a big gap in our lectionary reading between verse 34 and 53. What happens in between? What happens in between is that after Jesus sees that they were sheep without a shepherd and began to teach them, he then feeds the 5,000. Because that's how many are in the crowd. And then Jesus walks on water. And then, verse 53, when they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored the boat. People recognized him and rushed him. And Jesus does not say, but I had other plans. Jesus does not act like a movie star caught by the paparazzi, because he sees the need of the crowd. In my devotional writing for today, for this week, available on Facebook through our electronic newsletter Connections, or by request, I gave the Greek word that is translated into English as compassion. It is a word that means a movement of one's internal organs. You don't want to bring that up over Sunday dinner. Okay. Now that you've learned that bit of biblical Greek, save it for the right time. True, the ancients believed that our internal organs were part of our emotions, which is why they think love comes from the heart. Which is why Oliver Cromwell, the Lord Protector of England, the only time in English history that England was a republic, wrote a letter to the Scots. Don't oppose me. I beseech you, in the bowels of Christ, consider you may be wrong. Okay, so that's what the ancients believed. But can you just imagine for a moment that God incarnate, the Word made flesh, God among us, God with us, God for us, looks at our plight and our condition, at our needs and at our yearnings, and his whole stomach churns in reaction to what he sees, so profoundly that he forgets what the disciples need and pours himself out for the sake of the people. And notice that the people have no doubt whatsoever who he is and what he's about. Mark's gospel has been a litany of people getting the wrong end of the stick. Chapter after chapter after chapter, up to this point and after this point, where there's an argument over who Jesus is, whether he's even from God or more diabolical than that. Where Jesus gets his power from and what his power consists of and what his power is being used for. And whether he's the reincarnation of John the Baptist or Elijah or some great prophet of old. Nobody seems to get who he is. But I shouldn't say nobody. The movers and the shakers don't have a clue. The people of power and influence don't have a clue. The people with authority have no earthly idea who this Jesus is. But the crowds know. The ones for whom sleep doesn't come. The ones whose bodies are decaying. The ones in pain and grief and loneliness. The proverbial little and lost and least, they know who he is. And they flock to him in enormous numbers. They limp there, they crawl there, they're carried there. And everywhere he goes, people who have deep and abiding needs appear before him and have no doubt whatsoever that this man has power and love and grace. Yeah, some people don't know, but the ones who are suffering, they sure as heck know who this man is. Because up until then, they were like sheep without a shepherd. That sounds like a wonderfully poetic phrase to us, and it is. They were like sheep without a shepherd. But that was a familiar phrase to the readers or hearers of Mark's Gospel. They didn't need a biblical commentary or lecture to hear in those words the words of Moses in Numbers 27:17. Moses is getting towards the end of his earthly life, and the people of God who had been in the wilderness are within sight of the promised land. And Moses knows that he's not going to get there. And he speaks to God. There must be another, Lord, who can take my place, who shall go out before them and come in before them, who shall lead them out and bring them in, so that the congregation of the Lord may not be like a sheep without a shepherd. An image that gets repeated in Deuteronomy and Ezekiel and all sorts of other places. The Israelites had an establishing hope, meaning a hope that was there from day one. That didn't kind of come in as the years went by, but was present at creation. From the moment that the people of Israel knew themselves to be a people in a unique relationship with God, they had a deep and abiding hope that they would be shepherded by a shepherd that the Lord would provide. That they could gather around that shepherd and be led with love and grace and authority. A people of God gathered around a shepherd sent to them by God. You see, there's a constant yearning for prophets and kings. Later, a constant yearning for that Messiah, who could have been a mighty warrior, a great king, or a political liberator, and turned out instead to be a carpenter from Nazareth. What's going on in these texts this week and next week? Next week it becomes real clear, because the shepherd will sit his people down on the grass and will miraculously feed their bodies. It's a wonderful story, it's a familiar story. I don't want to ruin the surprise ending by saying more. Spoiler alert. But before that comes this week's gospel text, where the shepherd gathers his people around him and feeds their hearts and their souls with a message of repentance and love and forgiveness and acceptance, all of which is compounded into one incredibly insufficient English word: compassion. In the midst of which Jesus is defenseless and helpless, cannot choose other, cannot do other, but to pour himself out for a crowd of people who had ruined his break and moment of self-care. How awesome a revelation of the depth of God's love and mercy, that the God incarnate could look upon them and us in nothing other than divine, pure, unmerited, life-changing, and everlasting